Well, hello. Let's see, it's Saturday, July 13th. My name is Tony Christ. Welcome to Sunshine and Transparency. This is our podcast. We're sponsored by Odyssey Investments. Today, our topic is motor voter and sanctuary cities, counties, and states. That's correct. Cities, counties, and states. We're going to talk about that in a moment. First of all, I want to welcome you. I want to welcome the few new viewers we may have. I was alerted by some of my class members in high school that they may watch the podcast, so I'm counting them. I'm counting them as watching it. Today's topic is politically very motivated and driven. We're going to try to stay away from the politics involved, but we are going to discuss what I refer to as three political decisions, one on a national level, one locally in many areas of the country, and then a third one on a national level that's much more recent. These three decisions cover a time frame of 31 years that have led to the current situation. Now, I'm referring to motor voter. The law was passed in 1993 by Bill Clinton, and that's what started the current situation today. And we're gonna get into it momentarily. The National Voter Registration Act, NVRA is the abbreviation for it, was passed on May 20th, 1993. Now that opened the door for the abuses to our voter rolls today. And it's very important to understand the particulars of it and how they work in with sanctuary counties, cities, and states to create the opportunity for many migrant aspirants, essentially illegals in the country from a citizenship point of view, to get on a voter roll. Many of them do that and change their locations and don't notify anyone, and they stay on the voter roll for years. It's done simply by checking a box at DMV that says, "Are you ready for this? Are you a citizen?" And your answer is subject to penalty of perjury, yes or no. If you check the yes box, what's the likelihood that your violation is going to be discovered? That's an interesting question, and one that we're going to talk about here shortly. Okay, motor voter, when it came in, it came in for fairly good reasons. At least that's what the promoters said, to allow people to easily register and go on voter rolls. And since there's a much broader swath of people that are driving and have driver's licenses, I think it's up to 46 states today allow you to check that simple question when you're at DMV renewing, extending, or getting a driver's license. And after you check it, apparently there's no check of whether or not you're authentically a citizen. You are on that voter roll, okay? And whether you're a migrant who essentially is not a citizen, you're on that voter roll. There's no threat. Now, there are a couple states that we're going to talk about what they have done to prevent that kind of easy abuse. Then we're going to talk about 12 states and 133 counties and cities in America, 133, which are called sanctuary counties and cities. Now, what does that mean? Now, I'll tell you, the police in those counties and cities, uh, to the degree that they don't support ICE. Now, ICE is U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. To the degree that they don't support ICE, they're in violation of federal law. Now, many of them go through very many sort of pretenses of supporting in certain ways, but also it is very apparent that in many others, they're not supportive of ICE and they're in violation of federal law. Now, the other thing these sanctuary cities are doing, uh, they are allowing the migrants that are aspiring for asylum. Uh, Usually, that's what is checked for at the border. Technically, unless you tell them at the border your life is being threatened, okay, you're not going to get in the country. You're not going to get a court date assigned because you're not qualified for asylum. Now, that's an oversimplification of it. And there are other ways you might get a court date, but the vast majority are asylum dependent. In other words, for political reasons or religious reasons, they feel, and it can be confirmed, that their life is being threatened. And America is a great country. We're a country of immigrants. Come to us, we will let you in. Now, the way I structure this, I view this as a confluence of those three pieces I mentioned earlier that's creating the problem. First of all, you have voter motor in 1993 was passed into law, allowing everyone to access a voter roll when they get their driver's license. Then you have the explosion of sanctuary cities, counties, 133, and states, 13 states, the whole state, including the two most populous states in America, are sanctuary states. And sanctuary states, cities, and counties, guess what they do? They allow migrants to get driver's licenses. Okay, are you beginning to see how this is coming together? So in those sanctuaries, you can get a driver's license if you have a credit card and a utility bill. You can show up at DMV and get issued a driver's license and ask that one question: are you a citizen? And if you check yes, you will automatically go in the voter roll. Okay. The only time that ICE checks the influx of immigrants is when they are at an asylum hearing and they are getting granted asylum. If they're getting granted asylum, a check is done prior to the granting of asylum to make sure they're not on the voter roll because they're not citizens yet, right? The asylum just gives them the right to be a legal immigrant and to work towards citizenship. They still aren't citizens if they're granted asylum. We're just saying, we understand your life is threatened. You're in America. We're going to protect you, and we're going to allow you to stay. That's the only time it's checked. Now, it gets politicized because very few during that check turn up on the voter roll. And there are a lot of people out there who minimize the fact that illegals are on voter roll because the check only occurs among that group. Well, let me give you a news flash. There's a paper that was done in a county, and the paper was interviewed 30,000 juror members. Now, where do you think you get members for a jury? Well, when you're looking for jurors in a jurisdiction, guess what? You go to the voter roll. And of 30,000 names, they found 3%, 900, that were not citizens. Now, that paper really profoundly stuck with me because there's no additional check of immigrants. Now, why is it so important that the vast number of immigrants aren't checked? Well, because there's just a tiny percentage of those crossing the border that appear and are granted asylum and are checked. Now you have let's just deal with numbers and tell you how I come up with 92 to 95% are never checked. Tell you how I get there. Let's take 100 people, right? Okay. 50% don't show up. They're all assigned hearing dates. 50% don't show up for the hearing. Okay. Well, that's half of them right there. Now in 2023 through the month of August, 14.4% of those who showed up for their hearing were granted asylum, okay, which came to a little bit over 5,000 people, okay, that were granted asylum in 2023, and they were checked on the voter roll. Now, there are currently, let's see, 3 million, I want to get the numbers right, 3,595,000 cases pending. Okay. Now, if 50% of them don't show up and 50% do, that reduces it to 1,799,000 cases that show up. 14%. Now, those cases are not all heard in one period. Those cases are given dates that go out 3, 4, and 5 years. So even for the ones that show up, let alone the ones that don't, there's nothing imminent that's going to happen to them. To the 1,799,000 that didn't show up, they may have been given a date in 2026 or 27. So they're just sitting there, and they will get a driver's license. Okay, but there's no check on it. So you have so far in 23. You had 35,652 cases were heard, and 8,200 of those cases were approved under their asylum cases. 8,200 out of 35,652, when we know half of them don't show up. So the percentage when you run it was 14.4 of the half that showed up. Of the whole group, it's only 7.2%. I estimate 92 to 95% of those who cross the border, because remember, you have at least 2% that are not going through, that are being smuggled into the country. And I count them too as not being detected. So you have 92 to 95% that are not checked, that are not recorded, and many of them, and if not most, end up in asylum states, asylum cities, or asylum counties. And in those situations, if they're going to work, they're going to get a driver's license. If they're going to get a driver's license, they're going to be asked, are you a citizen? Now, this goes to the heart of harvesting. It goes to the heart of absentee balloting. Absentee balloting was also a part of voter motor. It was passed into law. It didn't become an issue till you got to Obama in 2008. Remember Acorn and those guys that were very aggressive with soliciting votes for Obama? It became an issue then, but it really wasn't an issue for the first decade, 15 years, 13 years, after 12 years after it was passed into law. So now we're going to come up with a correction. We're going to come up with a correction for the immigration problem, a correction for motor voter, giving access to a voter roll, which is supposedly only for citizens, not for people, no matter how honest and well-intended they are, not for migrant aspirants who are viewed as illegals as far as citizenship and a number of other things. Now, before we get to that, there's a third piece that's created the border problem and that ultimately ends up with a registration problem on voter rolls. And I've explained that transition from the border problem to the sanctuary cities, counties, and states that give open doors to driver licenses and the ability to check one box under penalty of perjury and say, yeah, I'm a citizen, check, without a consequence, because it's not surveilled, it's not monitored by the authorities. It's almost funny. So that's a problem. Now, why do all of them come to this country? Okay, why do all the asylum requires that your life is being threatened, you're at mortal risk, fear of death, and you're coming to America? We have big hearts. We love our immigrants. We're a nation of immigrants. My father was an immigrant, Greek immigrant, and I have a lot of respect for immigrants. But that doesn't mean that all of them are coming for that reason. So what's the difference today from, say, 1945 when my father came to America? Well, there is a difference. And you can talk about it in two contexts. We'll talk about it first in the Biden incentives. And I say Biden because during the last 4 years, we've had explosions on the southern border. We've had numerous people coming in. And it may not be for the reason that we're as great as we think or as powerful as we think, because we have very severe problems today. But it's because the Biden administration is offering gifts. Okay, they have flown in 500,000. In other words, they've given them now, I don't know what the statistics are on that group that they've flown in for asylum. They've actually gone to another country. They've skipped right over the border and flown them into America. Now, the ones that go through and confront the border, our border people, and are interviewed in a preliminary interview and are given a court date, that group is also bused to various cities all across America and flown to various cities. I believe 40,000 have been flown out of Florida. I believe I heard the governor say that. So there's an expense to this. There's an expense to the city. If you look in New York, housing migrants and then getting permission for them to work. Okay, remember, we said in every sanctuary city, county, and state, a migrant can get a driver's license simply by showing up and showing a utility bill and a credit card, two forms of identification. He doesn't have to have a birth certificate. He doesn't have to have a social security number. And that's a very key thing. So they're not only coming to America because they want to be Americans. That's part of it for sure. They're coming because of the gifts that are being offered by the current administration. And let's not only look at the current administration. Let's look at I'm looking for them right now. Let's look at the following. Now, there are certain, I'm going to read you a list of additional gifts that are part of our welfare program that technically they're not supposed to get. But guess what? When they go to sanctuary cities, counties, and states, they get them. They get them anyway. Okay, now they're not supposed to get this list. Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. Okay, that's available for families, for children that don't have food. Totally violated, totally fraud, full of fraud. A temporary assistance for needy families. That's also an availability they access. Emergency Medicaid, including labor and delivery. Full scope Medicaid they access. Good Samaritan, free medical treatment for anyone that walks in any emergency room in America. Hey, I'm covered. I'm on Social Security and Medicare. It takes me weeks to get an appointment. They can walk in, say my chest hurts a little, and guess what? Oh my God, we'll spend 40,000 on them, 30,000. Now, this is an issue because if any of you have paid attention to our last two podcasts, I've been very concerned about the state of our medical care in America. And one of the reasons is I actually started writing about it in 2008. I included that paper on the website, odysseyinvestments.info, under consensus. That's paper number 34 and 35 and up to date of how we rank medically. And we're having issues, particularly in the last 2 years. That's what triggered me to do it. Last year, I believe there were 80 hospitals that filed for protection under bankruptcy. This year, just a month ago, 33 hospitals in 7 states filed for bankruptcy. 12 shuttered their doors. Okay, now also 100,000 physicians within the last year have left private practice, many migrating to hospital systems, which they don't necessarily want to do. But between the rise in cost and malpractice and the many other details, the requirements of the government-controlled insurance programs, it requires them to have extra staff. It's more easily handled in a medical complex than it is a private practice. But these are great losses for individuals as far as medical care. And that's what triggered me to write it. And right now, I believe this is correct. About 20% of all medical bills aren't being paid. Much of that is due to migrants taking advantage of free care. And do you blame them? Not at all. My God, they can't get that kind of care back in their own country. But the net effect of this is it's reduced our metrics in America and increased our expense to the point that in 2023, and last week's podcast covered this, we spent 17.7% of GDP, gross domestic product, 4.9 trillion with a T, on medical services, 53% of which I track to government. 53%. And you say we don't have nationalized medicine. Well, my God, what do you want to call it? Other countries are spending about 11.15%. I did a group of comparable industrialized countries, 14 of them. They're spending 11.15%, and their lifespans average was 82.6 years. Ours is 76.4, and we're spending over 6% more, over 1.6 trillion, almost the amount of our annual deficit, more on medicine. Why? Nobody knows. Nobody's looked at it. A huge issue. Certainly it's been affected by some of the 10 million illegals that have come in the country. And right now, quoting 2 studies in the paper that will be posted on the website, paper number 36, Motor Murder in Sanctuary Cities, the one I'm talking about right now, will be posted with the podcast under consensus, paper 36. And we'll talk about the detail of some of these things. There are 2 independent studies. One says right now we have 10.99 million illegals in the country. The other one says we have 16, what is it, Tony? It's 16 point, I'm looking for it. Well, it's over 16 million illegals in the country right now. 16 million illegals. Illegals are migrant aspirants. We don't really know who they all are. I mean, you could have 1% of 16 million is 1.6 million. They could be bad guys. I mean, they could be real bad guys. We don't know. Border guards don't know. They occasionally, when they take their names and their identifications and let them in the country, follow up and find out some bad news. For example, that they were on terror watch list. But do you know where they are? No. No, we don't know where they are. They're somewhere in the country. Oh, great. So, the system is broke. And we're in a definite spiral of uncontrolled spending. And part of it is medical care. And a chunk of that is due to illegal migrants coming into the country. Now, that said, the system can be fixed. So you have those 3 disparate things that have collected together. You have the treats or gifts that the political class, and I'm talking about the executive government, the executive branch of government, is offering, the extra treats. You have the underlying treats, SNAP, the food programs, the needy family programs, Medicaid, extended Medicaid, the offers of Good Samaritans at every hospital that have been there, in addition to flying people in, giving them cell phones, giving them money, putting them up in hotels. Tens of billions and billions of dollars are spent daily on immigrants right now, with the hope, frankly, that they're going to turn into productive citizens. But that's not always the case, right? Because we don't know who they are. So we're going to talk, and we're going to conclude this podcast by talking about how to fix the system, fix the immigration system, and fix the voter roll. They both need to get fixed. And then we need to deal with the politicians and the gifts, because the gifts are going to kill us. I don't even want to get, that's a separate podcast in itself. But a country, a democracy, that there are many people that have said this, that figures that it can vote itself gifts, is getting close to the end of democracy as we know it. So basically, here we have this situation where we have as many as over 16 million illegal migrant aspirants, let's call them, in the country, many of which we don't know where they are, many of which we don't know who they are. We know half of the ones that were checked at the border never showed up again. We never heard from them. We know that amnesty only allows 5 to 8% of those who claim it to get it. Now that tells you something right there. You know, people are playing us like a violin, playing our country, taking advantage of our good heart and our openness left and right. And you don't blame them. Why would you blame them? They're getting offered free plane rides. They're getting offered money. All they have to do is pay the cartel a couple thousand, $3,000. Now, if you're Chinese, it could go up to 30,000, and they'll get you right into this sort of spin mill over here. And what an opportunity! And if you're a pregnant woman, you'll get free maternity. You'll go into labor in an emergency room. They'll put you in the hospital. Everything is here. So why not? Because we're running out of money, and I watch it all the time. I'm hoping one of our auctions for debt doesn't fail, because then the dollar would drop like a brick. Oh, down. And you think we've had inflation, you don't have a clue what we'd be in for if that happens, and God help us, it won't. So how do you fix it? How do you fix this tripartite thing that has come together to create this sort of easy fraud to penetrate our voter roll, and also this sort of argument on the border of whether or not these people are truly faced with life-threatening situations at home. Mind you, only 5 to 8% of them ultimately are admitted for that reason. What about the other 90-some percent? Well, they're lying. They just want to get into the country and get a number, get a free flight, get a cell phone, get some dollars in their pocket, and they want to get into the country. So the first thing, so how do you cure this? Well, there are 3 things you need to do, and they're all simple, okay? And they need to happen. And the urgency, there's a bill that the House just passed. It doesn't do what I'm going to suggest, but it's an attempt. It won't get through the Senate anyway, because the Senate just loves the current system. And it won't get signed by the president. So first of all, what do you do about the amnesty, the seekers of asylum, that their lives are in danger, that want to come to the border and enter on asylum? Well, if a person is being threatened in their country of origin and their life is at risk, they don't need to go across 5 countries. They need to go to one country away. One country. the nearest country to them. And at that country, they can apply for asylum. Why do they need to go through 5 countries? That country that they went to isn't going to threaten them for religious or political causes. Why are they coming to 5 countries, okay, to get to us? It doesn't make sense. We only ought to accept asylum applications from our bordering countries. And we would accept them from anyone. But when they migrate to the country next door, they can make an application at the embassy. It can be expedited. There have to be things put in place to change it, and we can consider it. That would eliminate 95% of the people coming to the country because they're not in countries next door to us. They wouldn't come, or they wouldn't be admitted. We wouldn't need the guards. We wouldn't need the processors. We wouldn't need the food. We wouldn't need to contain them because they're not going to be admitted. And we don't need to go to countries where there's hardship and fly people into America without proper vetting. And we've been doing that more and more. And look, you're always, when you have there's always going to be a rotten apple. I don't care what you think you're doing and how positive you think it is. America has a right to know who's coming into the country. We have every bit of right to know that. And to deny us of that right by grabbing a bushel of people and flying them in, even if they're Haitians and they're undergoing very difficult political times, is not right without vetting them. They've got to be, we need to know who we're getting, okay? They can go next door. They don't have to come all the way here and apply, okay? How do you apply? Show up at the embassy, and we can extend some service to them till we consider them. We need to know who we're bringing in the country. That's the first right. And we need to reestablish our border. So by instituting that rule that on asylum seekers, we only accept them at the border from adjacent countries, countries that surround us, that run in, their border runs into ours. If they're from another country, yeah, if they're from Venezuela, well, go to one country over, go to our embassy and let us know you want asylum. Period. Guess what? The whole border problem has disappeared. Although we still probably need a wall because there's a ton of cartel behavior importing people that aren't even going to bother with our ICE people or our guards to get a date. And they're not even going to bother to lie that they're seeking asylum. Okay, so we still need a border wall. And that gets to the second thing. And fixing the voter rolls is the simplest of the 3, actually. The second thing is you can't have all these giveaways for immigrants. You can't subsidize. I mean, my dad was an immigrant, didn't get a cent from the government, was blessed and loved this country so much, as so many do. But today, it's been convoluted with welfare, and the system is out of control. I mean, when I say out of control, we're issuing $1 trillion more in debt every 90 to 100 days. A trillion with a T. We have issued, since Bush left office, 26 trillion in debt. We only had 8 or 9 trillion from George Washington to George Bush. 200 and some years of politicians. And the last 3, Obama, Trump, and Biden, oh my God, they've gone crazy borrowing money. That's unsustainable. Every American ought to know that. We don't have money, and the cities that they're going to don't have the money to put them up in hotels either. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. It would all stop if we instituted that asylum policy that said no one can be admitted unless they're claiming asylum from a border nation of America. You're talking about Mexico and Canada, basically. Otherwise, you have to go out of your country to an adjacent country. You don't have to go through three or four of them, and you can claim asylum there at our embassy. Guess what? We don't have a lot of people showing up at the border. If they do, they just get turned back around. We do have to finish a border wall. We do have to secure our border. Uh, and that has to happen because of what the cartels have done and the other activities going on in our borders. That will have to happen. But we must curtail the gifts, advertise gifts all throughout the world. I mean, any cartel solicitor will give you a list of benefits that this administration is making available to anyone that gets across the border. I mean, come on. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know this. It's crazy. The gifts. Sure, they're going to come. We don't have the money. We may have the heart. We can individually give through charities all we want. We don't have the money. It must stop. Cities are essentially bankrupt. New York and California in particular, New York also, don't have the money. So basically, that has to stop. So that's the second thing. So now we resolve the border by requiring them to be from a neighboring country to gain admission to cross the border. It wipes out almost 90% of it. And the second thing is they can apply through any adjacent country just as they would apply by crossing our border on catch and release. And then curtailing all the gifts. We don't need gifts. The law is very clear. If anybody should cross that's coming from an adjacent country, they've got to be kept in a confinement until their cases are considered. Catch and release is not a part of the law, never was a part of the original law. Just because these people have been overwhelmed, they catch them and release them, and we don't know where they go. We know half of them we don't ever find unless we indirectly run into them again. We know they go to sanctuary cities, they get driver's licenses, they get on our voter roll. So for the voter roll, the third thing, and this is the simplest of all three, Virginia, the state I'm in, doesn't. And they're one of three states that do. We must require a social security number. So in addition to that question, are you a citizen under penalty of perjury? Check yes or no on the box to their DMV license. In addition, what is your social security number? Now, that has to be checked thoroughly too, because they can get somebody else's number. But you have to make sure there aren't two with the same social security number. But I'm going to assume that can be vetted, and social security system generally doesn't give out numbers to non-citizens. And then you cure the voter roll problem. But you have voter rolls out there with literally thousands, if not tens of thousands, of illegals, of migrant aspirants on them right now. You have to purge those voter rolls. You have to take every name and find a social security. You have to tell every county and state voter roll agency to do that purge on their rolls. And that has to occur. It should occur before the next presidential election. We already know, I mean, going by what the jury collection found in that one county, 3,000 should have been purged off the voter roll. Of course, they were looking for jurors. They weren't even concerned about the voter roll itself, but they did it from the voter roll. And that's why they learned that they weren't citizens. And we need to take time and purge the existing voter rolls. But it's not going to do any good unless we solve the border problem and solve the gift problem. Then we purge the rolls. Guess what? No problem. It's a done deal. But you have to touch all three of those bases. Now, we're hopefully going to grow in viewership. The intent of our program, we called it Sunshine and Transparency because that's what we're about. We happen to be dealing this week with a topic that's in the press this week that was just passed by the House and is going to the Senate, a bill that I don't think is anywhere near as complete, to my understanding. I haven't read the whole bill. I've just read a couple of excerpts as what we just suggested on this podcast, because it's a threefold problem. If you don't do all three, you're going to be left with a problem. And I don't think the bill does, but the bill's not going to pass because Biden's against it. Biden will go down in history as the greatest gift giver in the history of America. He's going to surpass Johnson as gift giving, which was huge. And the consequences to his gift giving are going to unfold over the next few years. And Sunshine and Transparency is going to talk about them individually. We're going to try to talk about them in a non-political context. We're going to talk about them in a monetary context, in an economic context, and what the likely effects will be to us, the citizens. And we're already seeing some of the effects of this gigantic spending started by Trump and topped out by Biden, actually started by Obama. And we're seeing some of the effects with price rises that have occurred unexpectedly. They should have been expected. And I certainly expected them long before they occurred. But the real problem is our debt, and the servicing of our debt requires payment of interest, and that's something we're going to spend a lot of time on. We're going to talk about the markets. We've got a lot of topics to cover. So I advise you to go to odysseyinvestments.info, Odyssey Investments, plural, in all one word, .info. Go to consensus. You'll see when this gets posted, you'll see 36 topics we've covered. And I'm not going to tell you what we're going to cover next week. I'm just going to surprise you. We'll have another one next week. We do it weekly. And we hope we offer it at no charge. We hope it's a benefit, a plus to the public. And honestly, in my heart, I try to reach Gen Zs and millennials, the younger generations. I'm a baby boomer, if you didn't notice, and try to reach them with this message. So have a blessed week. We love you. We hope you continue to watch Sunshine and Transparency at odysseyinvestments.info. God bless you. Have a great week.